As you can tell, we're right in the middle of a main process of the water cycle. Check it out. Listen to the rain, look at the rain fall, and listen to those frogs begging for more. This is actually the leading edge of that tropical storm that was a hurricane called Hermine, or Hermione, whatever. The water cycle. As we know, the water cycle is the endless process on Earth where water gets recycled and gets reused over and over and over. There's no such thing as new water. The water that we use today is the water that's been being used by creatures on our planet since the Earth began. And as we know, there are three main steps. Okay, there's evaporation, there's condensation, and there's precipitation. These are the three main steps: evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. And we'll talk about each one of these on its own in just a moment. Most people think evaporation is the first step of the water cycle. Evaporation changes liquid water into an invisible vapor called water vapor. So evaporation changes water into a gas called water vapor. And if you look at it, you can see the word vapor in the middle of it, and that's a good way to keep the steps straight if nothing else. So evaporation is the process of liquid water becoming an invisible gas called water vapor. Now, it takes energy to cause evaporation. And where does this energy come from? Of course, it comes from the sun. The sun's energy heats up the water. It adds energy to the water, which causes evaporation. So, liquid water changing into an invisible gas called water vapor. Evaporation. Liquid water changing into an invisible gas called water vapor. So condensation would be called the second step of the water cycle. Condensation. Condensation is the process of this invisible gas called water vapor changing back into little water droplets, little tiny pieces of water. So to cause condensation, we have to have cooling. Okay? We have to have cooling. We have to lose energy. Okay? Condensation, we can see. We can see condensation. Clouds are condensation. Clouds are condensation. Of course, we can see them. Now, when condensation begins, these water droplets are very tiny. They're microscopic. We can't even see them. But as condensation continues, these little microscopic droplets of water, they begin to get larger and larger and larger, and we can see them. And as we all very well know, if you set a glass of iced tea or a cold bottle of soda pop or something on the table, they're just going to start kind of getting a kind of a fuzzy color to it. It's going to look a little dull. And then if we leave it sitting there long enough, we're going to actually see little drops of water forming on it. And these little droplets of water are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until they actually start sliding down the side of the bottle or the glass onto the table. And that is what we'll talk about in the next frame. So those little droplets of water that are sliding down your glass of tea or your soda pop, that's precipitation. Those droplets of water got so big that gravity pulled them back down to the earth, or to the table in this case. Precipitation is the process of water returning to the earth. So it's water returning to the earth. Water returning to the earth. Actually, these water drops get so big that gravity begins to pull them out of the sky. All right? There are 4 types of precipitation. There's rain, which we all know about. There's sleet, which is actually raindrops when it's so cold that they freeze before they hit the ground. Sleet. Snow, something that we all think we like to see. Snow. And hail. Hail is little chunks of ice that form during thunderstorms. We usually have those in the summertime, and we're just as glad to never get them. But the 4 main types of precipitation, 4 types of precipitation, are rain, sleet, snow, and hail. So to recap, evaporation. Now you'll notice I got the word transpiration written under there. Evaporation is the process of liquid water turning into an invisible gas called water vapor. But plants also give off an incredible amount of water back into the atmosphere. I just kind of jokingly call it plant sweat. So transpiration is the process of plants giving off water vapor back into the air. Condensation, clouds are condensation. Condensation is the process of this invisible gas turning back into little tiny droplets of water. And when these little droplets of water get big enough, as they all stick together and begin to fall, that's called precipitation. So after it begins to precipitate, we have water on the ground, liquid water. Now, if it's a lot of water, some of it is going to turn into what we call runoff. Runoff. This water is literally going to run off the ground and go soak in somewhere. It's may go into creeks, streams. Streams may flow into rivers, and these rivers eventually flow back into the oceans. One thing we didn't mention is that almost all the water that we have in the atmosphere, most of it evaporates from the ocean. So the ocean is the greatest source of water vapor in our atmosphere. So if we have lots of evaporation and we'll have lots of precipitation, a lot of this water has to wind up into the ocean, and that's where runoff comes in. Okay, now, as we've talked about in another lesson, the water that we drink comes out of an aquifer. We'll talk about aquifer in a few minutes. But the water that soaks into the ground, this process is actually called infiltration. It's filtering down into the ground. It's soaking into the ground, where it slowly fills up the aquifer, which is an underground storage area that we get our water from. Here we have another important part of the water cycle. As you can see, this is runoff. So the water has hit the ground and is piling up. It's going downhill. It's flowing downhill. So this is runoff. This will eventually wind up down in the ditch, which will go to a stream, and then the stream will take it back out into the rivers and so forth. Now, some of it will soak into the ground. If you look over here, up here on the grass, a lot of this water will soak into the ground and infiltrate and go back down into the ground to help refill the aquifer. Okay? So here's a little hole that's full of water. That'll probably most likely soak into the ground. Infiltration, it goes back down into the ground to refill the aquifer.